In terms of management of the ferals in the area, control of the water points is critical. We're here on Belmont Station, which is about 30 kilometres northwest of Broken Hill, and the hills on Belmont surround Umbrummica Reservoir, which is one of the main water supplies for Broken Hill. This is one of the projects that we've done with the help of Western CMA. We're sitting on a fence line which is part of a large wing erected off of Umbrummica Reservoir to help herd goats that migrate in and water on the reservoir. The wing extends along this ridge line down here and then down into that valley and along the valley a couple of kilometres, and that's where it starts. There's numerous gateways and floodgates where goats can come in to water on the reservoir, and when we want to run them we can shut those floodgates and run the goats along the wing. Just over back behind us here, the wing continues down and forms a funnel with another wing coming in from the west and funnels the goats up on top of a hill, down a race into a yard, so that they run into a sort of a race type funnel without realising it, and by the time you've got them up there, you've got them within close quarters in a sort of a manageable area that with motorbikes and dogs that you can run them down into a yard without them sort of beating you too much. Before this wing was put in, this was one of the main watering points for everything around here for miles. For every feral and native animal in the area, they all came in to water on Umbrummica Reservoir. So it was fairly low on feed, and there was a lot of damage to mulga and other trees and plant species, and anything that wanted to regenerate had a fair sort of a battle. Now, if there was 1,500 goats watering on the reservoir here now it has stopped raining and things have stopped growing, there definitely would have a major impact. There's a lot of grazing pressure. It certainly would have a massive impact to a couple of thousand goats on 2,000 or 3,000 acres of fairly fragile hills country like this is. So, you know, that wing has given us the power to manage what populations live around here. And the goats populations can, especially in a good season like this, can explode exponentially. They can have 2 or 3 kids at a time, and I know from experience goats that are of no commercial value, too small to sell, can be having kids themselves. So what you think of is a small number can become a large number very quickly if they're left unmanaged. When you do have rain, like we have had, if there's no root structures holding that soil together, then it disappears pretty easily because it's so steep, the hills that it's running off, and you know, it ends up out in the plains, and that's how the plains got there. They're alluvial floodplains. If it's very heavily grazed, then you're losing what, you know, small amount of topsoil in between the rocks that you do have, you know, making it harder for more plant species to grow. If we're short of feed, we can't run sheep in these hills because there's too much grazing pressure from the goats. So it's got a twofold benefit, but my initial reason was to get the goats to sell them. There's no denying that goats have a fairly big impact on pastures. Having the ability to control the numbers is what has been the biggest benefit to the country out of it, and it's now one of my main sources of income, so there's definitely a financial benefit for me. When you run the goats in and catch and trap them, the goats of no commercial value, if you release them, then they remember how they were caught in the trap. So the next time you go to run goats, those goats that have been released that are mixed up with the fresh goats, they teach them where to go and how to avoid being mustered and caught. So it makes your job a lot more difficult if you let the smaller ones go. Since we've put this wing in, we've managed to remove well over 2,000 or 3,000 goats from the general area. Driving through the hills today, we saw very few goats today. The wing also helps block some of the goats coming in to water on the reservoir. The project involved 4 parts. The main and biggest part was this wing off the reservoir that we're on. It was in total 6 kilometres of hinge joint, 4 kilometre length of wing, and then it encompassed another 2 kilometres with other wings coming in, going up into laneways to make yarding the goats easier and give them less opportunity to escape. The other 3 parts of the project were 2 were traps around existing troughs that were watering points that were already used, and we We built mesh enclosures and built stone ramps up to those enclosures, jump-in ramps that were made out of the local stone. And the final stage was a part of a creek called Dense Camp Creek, where there's a natural spring and water flows out of the ground for about 1 kilometre, and we fenced in one side of that creek with a yard at each end, so that all the goats have to come around one side of the creek to water, and you can run them onto the ring lock fence and down into a yard at each end. All in all, the whole project was about 8 kilometres of a hinge joint and quite a bit of mesh for yards and that sort of thing. In terms of management of the ferals in the area, control of the water points is critical, because the country is so rugged and it is just so difficult to try and handle goats in this country without using the watering points. Water is something that the goats have to have when it comes to summertime. So if you can get control of those watering points, you pretty well can control all the country. But it's a lot of work. You know, generally it's a 3-hour process, you know, taking goats from around the reservoir up onto the wing and bring them along the wing, and most of the time you wouldn't bother doing it for 15 goats. You wait till they accumulate a bit coming in watering, and you might muster sort of 3 or 4 times a year. The last sort of 4 or 5 years we would have taken 600 or 700 goats a year just off the reservoir for this particular trap. But certainly a lot of places muster goats when they're not watering, using planes and motorbikes and dogs and that sort of thing. But having the wing set up here has made it manageable for a small family to, you know, get some sort of control themselves on the population.